The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Yeah, we used to chant it on the playground when we were in elementary school. Cheaters never prosper. Well, Michigan says they aren't cheaters. They're all innocent. And now they're national champs. 15-0 in a game that, well, they dominated at the beginning and dominated at the end against Washington last night. I don't think the final score really tells you what kind of a game it was, because there was a period of time when I thought Washington was going to come back and win. It was a 7-point game for a good part of the second half, and then a couple of mistakes and a couple more big plays, and all of a sudden it was a blowout for Michigan. But it was a good game. It was a good game to watch. Hell of a lot better than last year, wasn't it? And USA Today has ranked all of the 10 teams from the playoff era. The playoff of 4 goes to 12 next year, and it's going to change things dramatically. I don't think for the better. I think by the time we get to this national championship game next year, we're going to have to slog through a lot of bad football to get to it. I mean, you really want to see Liberty play Alabama? I don't think so, but they're in, with the way things are set up. Well, James Madison could have made a case to be there at one point in this season. And I don't think those teams are going to be competitive. We have seen a lot of blowouts in the playoff, and last night gave us a good game after 2 excellent semifinal games last week. So maybe this is the end of an era. It's a different world of college football, and the big stars from last night, it's a throwback for me in that you're familiar with these guys because you saw Blake Corum play last year. You saw J.J. McCarthy play last year. Pennick, well, I've been watching him forever. He went to Indiana where my son went to school, so I watched him play there for 3 years as he was in and out with injuries, and now the last 2 years with Washington. So I don't think it's necessarily bad for football watching, but the whole college football picture is really crazy, and we'll unpack some of that. Lauren Druhan, who's been with me for the college football season, big fan, loves college football. She watched last night, and we'll take a look at the game and this list that USA Today has put together of the top 10 teams of the playoff era, the 1 through 10. On that. Also, if you watched it yesterday or you heard it, I don't know if you had the same reaction that I did, but Josh Harris makes you feel pretty good. He's not the smoothest speaker. He does a lot of ums and ahs and that sort of thing, but there's honesty there, and there's humility there, and there's a desire to get it right and not get all the credit for it. The Dan Snyder era was marked by a very insecure man who surrounded himself with clowns and buffoons and yes men. And Josh Harris is trying to gather the best and the brightest to help him make these decisions. Now, does he have to have a guy who won NBA championships advise him on this? No, probably not, but he looks at him as a really smart guy and wants to bring him in. And the fact that they made this public, and they have been, if you look through social media, all the names that are out there that they're talking to for general managers and coaches, there is a timetable for this. Like, you can't interview candidates for head coach until their teams have been eliminated from the playoffs, and there is a timetable for when you can announce hires and so forth. But looks like it's off they go for general manager candidates. The latest is they're going to talk to Mike Borgonzi, who is with the Kansas City Chiefs, and they are in the playoffs. They have a playoff game this week. Adam Peters, San Francisco, he's apparently an old friend of Bob Myers. They're going to talk to him at some point. He's got the week off because they've got the first round bye as the top seed in the NFC. But if there's a name out there, he's being linked to the Commanders, whether it's coach or general manager. And Harris yesterday laid out his plan that he wants to hire a head of football operations and then hire a head coach. And he wants to do it quickly, but he doesn't want to do it foolishly. And he doesn't want to jump into anything. And one of the things, when he was asked about what he did with Philadelphia, the process, it doesn't sound like he wants to do that. But he also says sometimes when you do things too quickly, you take a step back. And boy, didn't we see that here for 24 years? An impetuous billionaire who thought, all I do is wave my checkbook and magically it happens. It doesn't work that way. So I was very impressed with him, and we'll play some of that as well. As for what they're going to do at number 2 with the quarterback, and I would be shocked if they don't take a quarterback, even if they move back a little bit in the draft. I got to think that they're going to be shopping for one. Mel Kiper has his list, and he still has Caleb Williams number 1 and Drake May number 2, and he even entered the possibility that Pennick would move up with what he did last night. That's not going to happen. It looked like Pennick was playing hurt, maybe even with broken ribs. I mean, he was really in pain at the end of the game, but didn't play well, and that certainly didn't help his draft stock either. So we'll unpack all of that coming up, but let's dive into the championship game from last night. Again, I don't think that the final score really tells the whole story, 34-13. I think it was much more about some really big plays, and really big plays early. And these rushing numbers are really incredible. Donovan Edwards had over 100 yards rushing, and he also had 2 touchdowns. But he did it on 6 carries. 6 carries for 104 yards. And the advertising going into this game is, well, this is a team that likes to run the ball, and Blake Corum is back for like his 16th year of college football, so they're going to give him the rock. He was off the field. I don't know why in the early going. It looked like maybe it was planned. They planned it out that way. But Edwards just took it to the house a couple of times, and then Corum came in and did his thing. He carried 20 times for 134 yards, also 2 touchdowns. And that was really the ball game. I mean, J.J. McCarthy, if you look at his numbers, his quarterback rating is very low because what he did as a passer wasn't much. He was 10 of 18 for 140 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. But what he did as a runner, I thought, my feel from watching the game was his contributions as a runner were bigger. They were really backed up. Now, they didn't wind up scoring off this drive, but they were backed up inside, I think, their own 10 or close to it. And on a 3rd and long, he took off for a nice run and also had 3 other carries in the game, 4 carries, 31 yards. I thought that made a huge difference for Michigan last night. And then he also, of course, delivered on what he had promised last year. It's hard to believe with the way TCU performed against Georgia in the championship game, but TCU beat Michigan last year, and McCarthy claimed that he would be back. And, in fact, he was back, and last night he delivered.
We came a long way, but in order to accomplish things like this, you got to go to those, dark places where everything's not great. And, just the response, the urgency right after that last game last year, it was different. I knew it, just from being on the podium last year and saying that we'll be back. I knew the guys that were coming back, and I had this feeling that it was going to be where we are right now. And, just all credit goes to, the players on this team, everybody in that facility, Coach Harbaugh. Like, that man, he's the reason we're here today. So just all thanks to him and to everybody on the team. And
McCarthy is on Mel's board, the number 5 quarterback prospect. And I don't think he really helped himself very much in that regard last night, but he's got the Natty. He's got the national championship, as does Blake Corum. And prior to the days of NIL, you wouldn't see Blake Corum back in college football. Even if he would have wound up being like a 4th or 5th round draft pick, he'd be making money in the NFL this year. But because of the ability to make some cash in college football, and reports are he made plenty this year, he came back for one more year to finish the job.
We knew what it took to get here, right? And when we all said we were coming back, and the guys that, had no other choice but to come back, we had to pay attention to details. And our strength coach actually hit on it last night when he was talking to us. But, it's the little things, the details, and we really locked in on those details all the way back, to winter workouts, summer workouts. We were always just trying to execute at a high level and pay attention to detail. I think that's what separated us a lot.
What do they say? The devil's in the details. The details, the small things that they concentrated on and didn't concentrate on. And you can debate whether they're big things or small things, but the head coach was suspended for half the season. He missed the first 3 games and the last 3 games for cheating. And Harbaugh said after last night's win, he said the off-the-field issues were innocent, and we stood strong and tall because we knew we were innocent, and I'd like to point that out. These guys are innocents. Overcame that. Wasn't hard because we knew that we were innocent. Well, the NCAA may have something to say about that, but the question is, where is Jim Harbaugh going to be when they do? Will he be back at Michigan for a reported offer of 10 years, $125 million, or will he be off to the NFL? He was dodged that last night, didn't want to address it, was asked about that. And, as I said yesterday, if the Commanders want to hire him today, they can. It's not like he's in the NFL. They have the ability, if they can work things out, in the day or two, they can get it done. He's got an NFL agent, Don Yee, who's Tom Brady's agent. And I'm sure that he's been fielding calls. And from the sound of things from Ashburn, it sounds like these guys have been working the phones like crazy. They're talking to anybody who's going to be available about coming here. So I would think, and there are reports that they've already talked to Yee about hiring Jim Harbaugh. This was Scott Van Pelt with the traditional post-game interview with the winning coach, as he does just about all sports, and had Harbaugh on with him last night. Now, this is after Harbaugh said to the media that he can now sit at the big boys table at home, the adults table, because his dad won a national championship, which was then, I guess, 1AA. His brother has won a Super Bowl, and now he's won a national championship. And he joined Scott Van Pelt to talk about the status that he now has in just his own family.
Do you just take the trophy now, plop it down at the head of the table, and say, "This is where Jim sits. This is my reservation at the table right here"?
Love you, Tristan. Yeah, and my dad has a national championship.
Yeah.
2002, Western Kentucky Hilltoppers, Jack Harbaugh, John Harbaugh, Super Bowl, 2012 season, 2013 Super Bowl, and now I can sit at the big person table.
Right on. You, as your players
Feels
are walking
good.
by,
Feels good.
I heard you say, "I love you too."
I mean, how about that? Where you live in a family where you're the only one who doesn't have one.
Well, but now you got it. Now you get to flip the script and tell your brother the pressure's on you in the 1 seed. I know you'll be cheering him on as he cheered you on tonight. As your players walk by and you're talking about the love, I kept writing this down. The love and the bond. Team 144. These guys keep talking about love and bond. How much did your guys lean on that throughout this journey together?
So together. That's the operative word. Togetherness. I mean, no secrets, nothing fancy. Just good old-fashioned work, good old-fashioned teamwork, and I do love them. I mean, they're like beloved sons, and the coaches that are on our staff members, they're like brothers to me, and they are true love. And same as my family. My wife's there, my kids at home, my parents, aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews. You can't imagine the support that I get from those two loves, both at home and at work, and just nothing but attitude of gratitude.
Right on. Jim, you mentioned it's nothing fancy. Winning a title, no matter what, has to be satisfying, I'm sure. But is there something that's maybe more satisfying to a Michigan man that you won because you had the best tackling team in the nation, and you won because your O-line was absolutely dominant and ran for 303? That still works in football in 2024. Is that maybe a little bit more satisfying?
Well, it doesn't get more satisfying than watching the way our defense played. I mean, against a elite team, elite quarterback. I mean, a heck of an offensive line, an outstanding receiving core. We missed a couple tackles, but I mean, there were some spectacular tackles. Yep. Open field tackles, tackles on the edge. Our guys, Kenneth Grant. I said, Kenneth, you did that. Mason Graham, you did that. Mike Sammerstel, he did that. Will Johnson, we had to get the momentum back. Will Johnson makes it the very first play to start the second half. Just guys, Jalen Harrell, Junior Colson, when a play has to be made, they make the play. Up and down the line, Jalen Harrell, Braden McGregor, all of our edges, Josh Wallace, same. You just count on these guys, the playmakers, the guys who make the magic happen.
You were asked in the post game about the future, and you said, "Can a guy enjoy it?" Absolutely, you can, Jim. There's a 24-hour rule some coaches have, but then I've heard other coaches that the next morning at breakfast after a championship, they got a list of stuff they got to get ready for spring ball. How do you let this sit? How long do you linger in the emotion and the joy of this moment before you start entertaining whatever else is next?
Well, we got a 1 o'clock checkout tomorrow, and then we'll get back to Ann Arbor.
Okay. Sort out the incidentals.
Yeah, I mean,
You got to square up the incidentals and whatever. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. 48 hours. Yeah. And give the guys some time too. I mean, I told them 3 or 4 days ago we're moving spring practice back. We usually start on Valentine's Day, February 14th, because we love football. But this year we're going to move it back. We're going to move it back about a month. That'll be good too. We'll have some nice weather in the spring in Ann Arbor.
Okay, so you're thinking about the spring in Ann Arbor. All right, well, the last thing I have for you, Jim, is there's a lot that's baked into a year like this, and it ends with this. And when you look back on all that's involved in it, the time you're away from your team, the conversation that surrounds that, ultimately Team 144 finishes 15-0. When you're an old man and you think back on this, what will be the most satisfying part of this journey that you and this team took together?
The team. That's the thing that's just echoing in my ear right now. As I said, it's nothing super fancy, just good old-fashioned teamwork. And as Bo Sandbuckler used to say, Scott, no man, no player, no coach is bigger than the team. Team 142 is now legendary and has given a new standard, a new ceiling, for future teams to break through.
15-0. His fourth team to do that. He says he's going to get a tattoo of 15-0. He did say about his Michigan experience. He was a great quarterback there as well. He says someday when they throw dirt over top of me, if somebody who's eulogizing me, if they would simply say he was a Michigan man, that would mean everything to me. Does it mean enough for him to stay? If I were he, I would get out. I think there'll be plenty of demand for him in other places, including possibly here. Now, Rex is with me today. I would take him. I don't think the structure that they're talking about putting together, and we're going to hear what Josh Harris had to say about that yesterday, I don't think he's really going to fit that. But knowing that you'd have him probably 4 years, maybe 5, Rex, I'd take him. How about you?
How could you not?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only knock on him is he's not the long-term solution.
Right. He's going to blow. He's 60 years old. So, Pete Carroll's 72. He's coming back for 15th year in Seattle, he says, and who knows what Belichick's future is. But he's a guy who's, wherever he's gone, he's won. He won at San Diego State. He won at Stanford when Stanford had been terrible. Stanford was winning like 2 or 3 games a year, and he won there. And he went to the San Francisco 49ers, who were bad, and he won right away. And then he went to Michigan, and, it didn't start out well because he kept losing to Ohio State, and they cut his salary. But the last 3 years, cheating or not, he's had great teams, and this is the best of them, finishing up 15-0. Josh Harris with his news conference yesterday. I have some thoughts on that, and we'll hear some of the sound bites from that as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
A lot more yak about the national championship game from last night, won by Michigan 34-13 over Washington. Lauren Druhan joining me at 10 o'clock, and we'll take a look at the list of all the 10 teams that have won championships in this college football playoff era. I remember doing shows with Mel Kiper 20 years ago, and that's seemingly all we talked about was, they got to have a playoff. Nope, well, they can't have a playoff because the bowls are too powerful. Now we got a playoff with 4. Next year it goes to 12. I think that's going to be too many, but you can't stop the money train. And the ratings of these games, I don't know what the number's going to be from last night, but the Michigan-Alabama game from last week was like 27 million people. But that's like, a late afternoon NFL number, that they get in the 4 o'clock window. Those are numbers that television people die for. In fact, and we'll talk about this probably a little bit later on more, that 93 of the top 100 TV programs from last year were NFL games. 93 of 100. That's all television programs, and that includes like State of the Union address, the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Those were the only 2 that cracked the top 50. NFL owns network TV. NFL is propping up network TV, and college football is not that far behind, especially for championship games. So why not? Why not expand it? And that's what they're going to do. Josh Harris spoke yesterday, and I tweeted this out, watching the whole thing, and he talked for about 20 minutes. He sat down with, no pretense. He's got a jacket and open collared shirt and a bottle of water, and he just sits down, makes a statement, and answers questions, and I thought answered them honestly. Didn't look like he was dodging anything from what he said. And I just got a feel of, okay, I understand why he's as successful as he is. He's very secure. Dan Snyder was a complete ball of insecurity, and you saw it with the people he surrounded himself with. Guys like Vinny Serrato, guys who were stooges and yes men, and evil people like Bruce Allen. Those are people who he kept around for a long time before he finally would dispose of them. And Josh Harris is saying, hey, I don't know everything. I've been successful. I own teams, but I don't know who exactly to hire, and I'm going to lean on some smart people that I know. And one of them is Rick Spielman, who's been a long-time executive in the NFL and spent over a decade with the Minnesota Vikings and was smart enough, although he didn't win a Super Bowl this way, but was smart enough when they bungled the whole Kirk Cousins thing here. They got Kirk Cousins to Minnesota. And you have Bob Myers, who, yes, was not successful, or I shouldn't say not successful, but has no experience in the NFL, but is as successful as you could possibly imagine in the NBA, winning 4 championships and getting to 6 finals. And I looked this up. Bo Schembechler, after he retired at Michigan, was a longtime friend of Tom Monahan, who owned the Detroit Tigers. So Monahan hired Bo Schembechler to run the Tigers, and that was a freaking disaster on and off the field. He fired Ernie Harwell, who was as much a part of the fabric of the Tigers as anybody, legendary Hall of Fame announcer, fired him, bungled the draft, just everything he did. He was only there for like 2.5 years and finally resigned. It was awful. But the name Paul DePodesta may ring a bell. He's the general manager of the Cleveland Browns, and he's got experience with the Indians. He's got baseball experience. And Jerry Krause, who they built that whole Last Dance around, he's the one that decided to break up the Bulls after the 6 championships with Jordan. But he put it together. He's the one that found Scottie Pippen and found the other complementary players. He was a good GM. His background was in baseball. Started out with the White Sox. So, not that Bob Myers is going to be the GM of the team and running the team, but he also understands people and knows how to make good executive hires and good hires like coaches with Steve Kerr. So I think this is very refreshing to see somebody like this, somebody who's secure in his own skin and seems to speak honestly about all of his moves, and starting with the move that was announced yesterday, and it came out right after the news that Ron Rivera had been fired, that he had hired Spielman and he had hired Bob Myers, and explained why.
Bob Myers is a winner. Like, who wouldn't want him on your team trying to help your franchise? He knows how to identify talent. He knows how to build winning franchises, winning cultures. I mean, he's obviously not a football person. He's not been around football, but he's an amazing sports executive, and I'm really happy to have him helping. He'll be around as an advisor to me. He's not going to be involved with X's and O's, but he'll be involved through the search process and beyond, as it relates to the Washington Commanders, helping us build an amazing franchise, an amazing culture, and a winning culture.
Also, this is about structure here. As we've seen in the past, we've seen coaches hired before general managers. The last go-round, we had the coach hiring the general manager, or at least he had that title, and he's still there, as a matter of fact. They haven't fired anybody but Ron Rivera yet. The new head of football operations is going to make decisions about everybody who's on the staff. And I would wonder, too, about Jason Wright, who we haven't heard a peep out of in seemingly months. I can't imagine he's going to stay, but no announcement yet. He appears to still be on the job, and I think once a head of football operations comes in, perhaps that position will answer to him. It's not anything related to on the field. It's a business department decision, but I'd be stunned if Josh Harris and his partners think that Jason Wright is the right one to lead this thing forward. He might. I mean, who knows? But my sense is that's not going to happen. This is about the structure, and this is the way that he wants to do things.
I start with talent. You want the best talent. And sometimes, you let the talent just sort of influence the structure. But my orientation, obviously, is that being the head of football operations, being, in essence, in that lead role, that's an 80-hour-a-week job. Being a head coach, that's an 80-hour-a-week job. I think there are two roles there. And so I think it's harder. I mean, there are certainly individuals that control everything. I think it's increasingly hard. So my orientation is not to do that. But on the other hand, I'm going to really be somewhat flexible around talent.
Yeah. So if he sees the guy, maybe he hires him, which, might lead you to think, okay, if we think, if my brain trust and I sitting together with the ownership group, which includes Mitch Rales, who's also highly successful in business, if they sit and made some great hires, obviously, in his life to help run his companies, if they look at Jim Harbaugh and they say that's the guy, he can talk to any team he wants to right now. His responsibilities ended before midnight last night. So if he wants to talk to another team, he can do that. And there's now, what are there, 5 openings now? There could be 3 or 4 more coming by the end of the week. So there's going to be competition for these guys. And what he's saying is if there's talent there and we spot that talent, we're not going to let that get away. This is about what happened in Philadelphia, the process, trust the process, where Sam Hinkie, the former general manager, was charged with making them stink for a long time so they would get high draft picks and become good, which they swung and missed on a lot of them, but they wound up with Joel Embiid and have been a competitive team, a team that's good enough to contend for the NBA championship. This is about turnaround and kind of a backdoor way of asking the question, are we looking at a process taking place here?
If we could write the script, it would be a quick turnaround. But on the other hand, you have to make long-term decisions and do things in a very, one person at a time, one athlete at a time. And so sometimes they take longer, right? So I think what my view is that we want it to be as quick as we can, but the ultimate goal, right, is to be an elite team that's competing for championships. And so I find that when you do things quickly, sometimes, you set yourself back. And so my orientation is to make the right decisions and let the time frame, take its own course. Obviously, I want a winning franchise quickly. But on the other hand, for me, it's about making the right decisions.
Yeah, thorough but rapid is the way he put it. And it just, thinking back to when young Danny Snyder bought the team at age 34 and gave his first interview and saying, we're going to win. We're going to win. Yeah, well, you got to know how to win, and it takes time, and it takes the right hires to do it. Now, look, Houston was the second worst team in the league last year, and now they're in the playoffs. They're hosting a playoff game, and they got the right quarterback. It worked out for them. And they got a head coach, comes from San Francisco, even though he's a defensive coach, which is not the way they usually go these days for head coaches. But they got a good team in a matter of a year. Could it happen here? Probably not, because the cupboard is bare. Terrible job by Rivera and his staff accumulating talent. So that's gonna take a while to change. I think that's different in Houston. But I think if you look at it realistically, especially if you get a quarterback, you can turn it around much more quickly in the NFL. There's a long history of worst to first. There have been teams that have finished last in their division and been in the Super Bowl the following year. It can happen. He's not promising that, though, which is good. I mean, he's understanding. He's being honest with people. This is about the way he's going to do it. Again, he wants the president of football operations first, and then he wants the coach.
My desire is to have the head of the football operations in place and then to work to listen very hard to what that person wants to do in terms of the coaching staff. In other words, I think those two things have to work together. And obviously, as I've said before, I want to get the best talent here and then hold them accountable and work with them, right? So what that person wants to do or not do is really important in our decision process. Doesn't mean that you are not involved in it, but it means that you're, to a large extent, you're relying on that person to bring a series of candidates to the table. And so that would be my ideal scenario. On the other hand, we have to move quickly here, so it's not perfect, but that's my orientation.
Yeah, again, moving quickly. So if he spots the guy, he's not going to pass it over just because he couldn't get the general manager in place in time. But they're moving. Again, reports are they're talking to Mike Borgnazzi today from Kansas City. Adam Peters, the general manager in San Francisco, is on the radar. I mean, any name that's been tossed around, it seems, as a candidate for either GM or coach, they're tied to them. Oh, you look at Twitter, you look at all the insiders who report on this, like Diana Rossini and Adam Schefter and people like that. They're all mentioning the same names. They're leaking these names. They want it out there that they're pursuing these people. Ian Cunningham of Chicago is on the list. Alex Hallaberry of Philadelphia is on the list. Glenn Cook of Cleveland. The top coach candidate, and his name has been out there for a while, Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator in Detroit. Mike McDonald, defensive coordinator in Baltimore. Dan Quinn, who's been a head coach before in Dallas. A lot of people are looking at him at this second go-round now and think he deserves another shot. Raheem Morris, who's been here, was on this staff, like many of the coaches around the league. He's a defensive coordinator with the Rams. There's Aaron Glenn of Detroit, which would also fulfill the Rooney Rule, African-American, as would Raheem Morris. So they'd like to talk to him. And Bobby Slovic of Houston is also out there. So, I mean, there's just one name after another, and they're all linked to Washington. They're all linked here. So they're not running away from this. You didn't hear Josh Harris say yesterday, there's a lot of stuff floating around there. Don't believe everything you hear. He wants it out there. He wants it there to say, one, to the fan base, hey, we're turning over every rock possible. We're looking in every place we can to find the right guy. And they're also saying to candidates that they're interviewing, hey, if you're not really interested in us and you're not sure, we're going to move on. We got a lot of people. So we think we got something really good here. We got new ownership. We got a fan base that if you make the playoffs next year as a last wild card, they'll be over the moon. And with the second pick, we may get that franchise quarterback. And I'll get to more on that with Mel Kiper and Tim Hasselbeck in a second. This was the last thing I pulled from. He, again, spoke for about 20 minutes. Last thing from Josh Harris yesterday, what he wants to say to the fan base.
My message to the Washington fan base is thank you. You guys showed up in droves. You believed in us. We sold out every game, even with a 4-win season. Now, granted, there were a few visiting fans there, but that's on us. We're not in the playoffs, and so thank you for showing up. And the future is bright. We have a lot of cap space. We have a great ownership group. We're very committed to winning for this city, and look forward to showing you, in addition to telling you, over the next series of years.
Humility. The way they operated in the past was, we're doing you a favor by letting you buy tickets. Yeah, that's the way they treated the fan base. And he's saying, we did sell out every game, but yes, I know they were visiting fans. And boy, the Dallas game, from all the tweets I saw and from what I was able to hear on television, it looked 70% Dallas, which is understandable. But he's saying that's on us. We got to fix that. We got to have a better team. We got to have bigger demand for tickets from the home base. Good for him. Let's get to the quarterback, what they're going to do at 2 if, in fact, they take a quarterback. They could move up. They could move down. But the pecking order of quarterbacks, even though there's been a lot of change this year, it's pretty much what Mel Kiper thought going into the season, that it would be Caleb Williams number 1 and Drake May number 2, but did say yesterday here on ESPN 630 that he has seen the gap narrow quite a bit.
I thought it would be a huge gap going into the year. I thought it would be Caleb Williams and everybody else, that he would be so far ahead. And really, even for the first pick overall, it wouldn't even be a discussion. You move forward with Caleb Williams, you trade Justin Fields. But Caleb struggles late in the year, particularly starting at that Notre Dame game. Why did that happen? What went wrong late? They end up winning the bowl game when he wasn't there. Last year, 2 years ago, he was spectacular. He looked like a generational quarterback. From the Notre Dame game on this year, he did not. So I think that made it bit of discussion what happened later in the year as to whether he should be, guaranteed to be the number one quarterback in this draft, and he still is, in my opinion. But and the thing is, Drake May could have put pressure on him, but Drake May had his own struggles. Go to the Virginia game, go to the NC State game, where he was just off in terms of his accuracy throwing the football. So I think, and Jaden kind of moved way up. Jaden was the one that moved from the third, fourth rounder into the top group. Michael Penix Jr. didn't have a great finish to the season in terms of the regular season, but then he had the Pac-12 title game, and then he had what happened, obviously, in the semifinals. So he's way up there. And then J.J. McCarthy has not yet had that wow performance. Is it going to happen tonight? We'll see. So I think it's still Caleb in a little bit of a drop-off, but not as significant as I thought it may be. But certainly it could have been a lot tighter had Drake had a spectacular year. So I think the battle now is between the second quarterbacks. So is it going to be Drake? Is it going to be Jaden? And then is Michael Penix going to, after tonight, going to be in the mix to be right there with them? Or is he going to be in the mix with J.J. McCarthy to be the fourth quarterback overall?
Yeah, and I think those questions were answered last night. McCarthy didn't do much, didn't have to do much because they ran the football right down Washington's throat. His numbers, nothing to write home about, 10 of 18, 140 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Penix was hurt, and he threw 2 picks. He didn't help his draft stock at all. So, based on what he has laid out there, you're probably looking at, Jaden Daniels, number 3. At this point, J.J. McCarthy, 4, and Michael Penix, 5. But a lot changes between now and the draft. And having worked with Mel for years, he explained this very well, that people change their minds all the time because it's not an exact science. We still have the combine, which is going to change a lot of minds, the individual workouts, all those things. And this is why Tim Hasselbeck has his clear-cut pick for the number one quarterback in the draft, as he told Dan Patrick yesterday.
Drake May.
Drake May.
And I think I told you guys that probably before the season started. And, and his season wasn't probably what I thought that it would be or what he thought that it would be. But this next phase of the evaluation process, Dan, is everyone's going to love him. Like there's his competitiveness, his intelligence, his physical ability, the things that you can measure, the care factor for him. I was like all of it. Everyone's going to look at it and say, like, in terms of leading your franchise, like there aren't going to be things that give you pause. They're not going to pop up.
Yeah, but it felt like he was under the radar this year. And we didn't expect him to be great. We expected Caleb Williams and USC to be great this year. And Caleb did it. Caleb was great this year. When you consider that defense was horrible, he kept them in games. It felt like with Drake May, we're like, oh, that's right, Drake May. We didn't hold him to the same standard, I think, as we did some of these other quarterbacks. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, probably expectation of the program. Obviously a lot surrounding USC, what we thought they would be offensively. And then maybe how bad the defense was. That's probably, kind of alarming. And, and then just like post-game reaction stuff that generated criticism that, I think was, probably surprising for some. And I would say this for, look, Carolina's program was not the same. Like it wasn't. And they had to change an offensive coordinator. So I think there was a lot to all of that stuff.
But does the Mitch Trubisky career have anything, is there any impact on Drake May? If you're the Bears, would you have pause of drafting another North Carolina quarterback?
No, because I think the skill set, the experience, this guy checks every box. So it does not, whereas with Trubisky, there was limited starts. There was, there were other things to say, like, we definitely are projecting. And now, look, we're projecting with all of these guys. Like, anybody who acts like they're not is lying. Like, we projected with Justin Fields. We projected with Jared Goff, Matt Stafford, like, projected with Brock Purdy. We're projecting, right? Like, I think it was Chip Kelly's comment, like, quarterbacks are a little bit like tea bags. Like, you can think you're getting green tea, but, like, until you put it in the hot water, like, you're not really sure, like, what exactly it is. But with Drake May, like when you go through the process and you see the ability and all of that stuff and the competitive nature, the intelligence, all of that, there aren't going to be similarities to Mr. Trubisky.
Okay, so you got Mel Kiper saying it's still Caleb Williams number 1, Drake May number 2. Tim Hasselbeck, who's not really in the draft analysis business, he's in the business of analyzing football and football players. He says Drake May, and we're going to see over the next few months with the combine and the individual workouts that he should be the number 1 pick. And they'll hear people go back and forth. I'll say this about the Caleb Williams situation, and it's not apples and apples because they're different types of quarterbacks. But it didn't help Dwayne Haskins to play in his hometown. It just didn't. And I don't think it's going to affect Caleb Williams in the same way. Haskins had to endure a lot of different things, including the COVID, and he got himself in a lot of trouble for going to a party without a mask and things like that. Very immature decisions. I don't think Caleb Williams is necessarily immature, but there's just so many things pulling on you when you go to your hometown. So many of your friends want things from you all the time. It probably wouldn't be the best circumstance for him to come here. So, does Chicago take him? Maybe Chicago might be the spot, but they may trade down. We've seen Justin Fields pick up a lot of steam at the end of the season, so it's possibly doesn't go there. But I would, if I were making the pick right now, today, and I were asked, which way do you go? Do you go Williams or do you go May? I would go May for that reason. You got to wonder about Sam Howell, who beat out Drake May, and May was there for a year while Howell played a year. How does he feel with the kid he was mentoring just a few years ago coming in to clearly take his job? I mean, it would just be a matter of time before. Now, it wouldn't be the worst thing if Howell started a few games and they allowed May to get his feet wet, because those things usually work out better when it happens that way. But just the irony of that you take the quarterback who sat behind you. I guess it's happened before, but not from a school like North Carolina, which is known for basketball, not football. Anyway, speaking of college football, Lauren Druhan loves it. She'll join us next. It's the Andy Poland Show, ESPN 630. Tony on a Tuesday. Tony's coming up at 11 o'clock. I'm sure he'll have some thoughts on the championship game from last night. Even for him, it ended at a reasonable hour, kicked off at 7:45 and wrapped up. Well, the game was pretty much over just before 11 o'clock, so it was about a 3.5-hour game, and it was won by Michigan 34-13. Throughout the college football season, we've had Lauren Druhan with us, former producer here, loves college football, and is lucky enough, I think, to live in a time zone where you can watch every game till its conclusion. So what, last night wrapped up, about 8:15 your time?
Yeah, and I got to watch the post game and was still in bed at a great hour. It was lovely. I love it out here.
Yeah. Well, even for me, as I say, kicking off at 7:45, I could deal with it. Is this a satisfying conclusion for you with Michigan going undefeated and winning the national title?
No. Granted, I haven't watched a whole lot of Michigan and Washington football throughout the college football season, but I watched every single second of every semifinal game.
Mm-hmm.
And if you would have told me that this is how that game shook out, I was baffled. I mean, it looked like Michigan got back to the old Michigan, because this team that played against Alabama was not the team that played last night. I mean, it was a night and day difference. And then Washington, same thing, but on the downside. Like, if you would have told me that this was Washington, I would have been like, that's a completely different team. It was insane. I mean, it was a semi-good game until Michigan ran away with it, but it just looked like Washington was struggling the whole game.
Yeah, I think Michael Penix was hurt, and I wonder if he even had broken ribs at the end of the game, the way he was in pain. He didn't help himself for the draft, that's for sure. And, you can argue about J.J. McCarthy, who didn't really have to do much because they just ran it down their throats. But I'm watching the first half, and I'm thinking, oh, my God, this is going to be a repeat of last year. Michigan is just going to blow their doors off, and sooner or later, Penix is going to have to start throwing. There's going to be a pick six, and this is going to be out of hand. I think most people who didn't watch the game and just look at the final score, don't you think Lauren wouldn't realize that in the fourth quarter, at least I was thinking Washington could realistically come back when it was 20-13. How did you feel?
Absolutely. I mean, it got to the point where I was like, okay, Michigan's about to put it in the bag. And then I had to start paying attention a little more. Like I was in the middle of cooking dinner, like meal prepping, and then I had to stop and sit back down because I was like, my goodness, like they could come back and do this. And I fully expected Michael Penix Jr. to do that. I mean, it was like Washington could not catch a break. I mean, if you watch them, in the semifinal game against Texas, their receivers, it was like they had super glue on their gloves. Like they were catching everything. Michael Penix was throwing everything on the dime. And then it was almost like they just could not get in a rhythm. And, I mean, at the start of the game, Michigan came out fast. And I fully expected Washington to, settle down, get settled, Michael Penix to put something together. But, yeah, I mean, you're right. He was hurt. It just was not. It was not their game.
Yeah, and a lot of people will look at Blake Corum as the MVP of the game, which I guess he should have been. 20 carries, 134 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But I wonder if he wasn't getting, I guess the ceremonial carries or the carries I guess he had earned by staying in the program for as long as he did and being a fifth-year senior and all that. They were actually doing better with Donovan Edwards. Did you see the numbers? Donovan Edwards last night had 104 yards and 2 touchdowns on 6 carries. I mean, I wonder if they would have stayed with him if it could have been worse.
Maybe. I mean, yeah, it was crazy. They had a lot of really explosive run plays that Washington just could not handle.
No.
It was wild. I think the stat was Michigan had 300 yards rushing and Washington had like 301 yards total. Like it was insane. They literally just ran it down their throats the whole game.
Yeah, and I here's how I felt. And I'm much more old school than you are, obviously. And I remember the 4-year players, and then in recent years that hasn't been the case. But the one I think good thing that NIL has brought back, I knew Blake Corum, I knew J.J. McCarthy, I knew Michael Penix, so that made it more enjoyable for me. How did you feel about that? Did that keep your interest up a little bit more?
Yeah, I agree. You have these big names, and then also the whole Heisman debacle. You know what I mean? It was like, well, Jane Daniels isn't in the playoffs. Jane Daniels isn't this. Jane Daniels isn't that. And to be honest with you, after watching Washington, Texas, I was like, well, dang, maybe Michael Penix Jr. should have won the Heisman. But then after last night, I'm like, no, like to be a Heisman, you have to play big in big games, and he didn't. And whether it was injuries or otherwise, it is what it is. But I agree, knowing these big names and hearing these big names, even if you don't watch a lot of football or a lot of college football, you know who J.J. McCarthy is, you know who Blake Corum is, and you know who Michael Penix Jr. is. So I agree, hearing those big names and seeing them, it won't be a surprise on draft day when you see those names.
Yeah, and also, those are casual football fans that only watch around the bowl season. The 3 top names for quarterbacks all didn't participate in bowls. Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels, all of them opted out, so we didn't even see them. So, once we get around to the draft, people will be somewhat familiar with them because they've been watching Mel Kiper talk about them for months and seen all the highlights. But in terms of seeing them play actual games, once they get to the NFL, I think a lot of people will be seeing them for the first time.
Yeah, I agree. And it'll be really interesting to see, how excited they are for them coming to their team or whatnot. But, yeah, watching them grow up and play in college football is truly something special. That's why I prefer college football, because when I do get to the NFL, I know all these guys. I know where they went, and then it's fun,
right?
A couple years ago to see the guys reunited with the college guys, like Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow and Waddle and Tua and all those guys. So it's fun to see them play together.
Talking to Lauren Druhan, huge college football fan, used to work here, and we've been talking to her throughout the season. It's rare when I can go down memory lane with you and cover an entire era that you're familiar with, being still in your 20s. But I have the list in front of me from USA Today of the top teams, well, actually 1 through 10 of this college football playoff era of the since they went to the 4 teams 10 years ago. So let's go through them, and I'll give you their little thumbnail on them, and I'm sure you have memories of all of them, right? You've been watching this since it started? You're old enough to have seen all of them? Okay, good.
Yeah, I'm old enough to have seen all of them. To truly pay attention, probably midway, but yeah,
okay.
I remember.
I can't talk about Nebraska and Oklahoma from 1971 with you, but I understand that. But but I can go here. So they rank and this is interesting. They rank of all the 10 teams, the 10 winners, the number 1 team is the COVID team. the 2020 Alabama team. They had the Heisman winner in Devontae Smith. And they went unbeaten against 11 SEC teams. Notre Dame and Ohio State scored at least 31 points in every game, at least 41 points in every game. But 2 of the games they won by 15. They say this is the most dominant team that Nick Saban had. I don't know about you, but I didn't really watch as much college football in 2020 because I didn't really know what games were canceled and when they were playing and things like that. I guess it's the best team, but it's a weird team in that they didn't have the usual stuff that goes with college football, which is the fan base,
Right, yeah. I would probably agree that it's probably the most dominant team under Nick Saban, at least in the college football playoff era. But to put them as the number one dominant out of all of college football playoffs, I don't know about that. That's a little suspect.
All right, we'll put that aside. Here's the team they ranked number 2. This is last year's Georgia team. They beat 5 teams ranked in the top 15. And then, I don't know what you can tell from what they did against TCU, but going 15-0, that's hard to do. So they put them number 2. What do you think?
Yeah. I agree. I'd probably put them at 3, to be honest with you, just because of how the college football playoffs shook out and what their schedule looked like. To be in the SEC West, it's kind of a cupcake schedule compared to the SEC East.
Right.
Granted, you're still playing SEC teams, but yeah, I'd probably have them at 3.
Okay, here's the one they have at 3, and I would put them at 1. Because, I don't know why, but maybe because of all the success these guys have had in the NFL. That's the 2019 LSU team, which went 15-0 with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Burrow threw for almost 6,000 yards and 60 touchdowns. LSU beat 7 ranked teams, including Alabama and Georgia, but they didn't really take off. Before getting past Auburn on the 26th of October.
Yeah.
To me, that's the best team I've ever seen. How about you?
Hands down, that would be my number 1 team. I'd probably go them number 1, Alabama number 2, and Georgia number 3. Top to bottom, probably the most talented roster that's ever been in college football, arguably, because, there's been some really great rosters in Florida State, so on. But yeah, hands down, top to bottom, most talented roster, most dominant quarterback performance I think I've ever seen, solely because of who he had around him. You were hardly on the edge of your seat because you knew Joe Burrow would do somthing to get you back in the game no matter what.
Yeah, and that's a guy who went into the season not on anybody's radar. It wasn't
Right.
He wasn't even being talked about among the Heisman candidates, and then he's just blew everybody up with what he did, almost 6,000 yards, 60 touchdowns. Wow. Number 4, Clemson 2018. That's Trevor Lawrence as a freshman. I don't remember this, but boy, they beat Notre Dame 30-3. They beat Alabama 44-16. I guess it was a down year for Nick Saban there, but they won the championship, and that's probably where they should be. I would put them at 4. How about you?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good spot for them. I remember this Clemson team. I was just jaw dropped. I was kind of like, who is Clemson? Where did they come from? You know what I mean? So that was a really, really good team. A lot of great players on that team as well.
They ranked the first of the Georgia national titles, the back-to-back, the 2021 team, number 5. They beat Alabama 33-18 in the playoff championship, and they allowed only 10.2 points a game. So they were great defense, and then that was Stetson Bennett before his, 6th year of college, second to last year. So there's that.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts? Do you had any particular thoughts on that team?
Yeah, I agree. I think both of Georgia teams should be in the top 5.
Okay.
They had a really dominant team, top to bottom. So yeah, I agree.
All right, they ranked this team, last night's team, number 6, and they talk about the schedule, and they're right. The Big Ten wasn't very good this year. I was at the Maryland game. Maryland gave them a real battle, one of the biggest battles they had all year. Penn State wasn't that good. Ohio State disappointing again. I think 6 is a good spot for them.
Yeah, not bad. That Washington team and Alabama were probably the 2 best teams they've seen all year. So yeah, I don't disagree.
Number 7, and I hope you can remember this, 2016. That's not too far back, right?
No, that's good. Yeah.
This was Clemson, and this is Deshaun Watson throwing the last-second touchdown pass to Hunter Renfrow to beat Alabama. That was pretty good.
Yes, that was really good. I remember Hunter Renfrow. I actually kind of became a fan of his because of that game and following him to the Raiders. And I kind of like got invested in Hunter Renfrow after that because, the hype that goes into post game and, making that big play. So I kind of followed him for a little bit. So, yeah, that was fun.
I think was he a freshman on that team? Because it seemed like he played a lot longer after that.
He was either a freshman or a sophomore.
Yeah.
I can't remember, but yeah, he did. I mean, he had a good career at Clemson.
All right, here's the bottom three of the playoff championship teams. Alabama 2015. They beat Clemson in the title game 45-40. They beat Clemson was ranked number 1 and LSU number 2 and Michigan State number 3. A lot to be said for that. But they ranked them at 8. Maybe they might be higher. I think they might be a little bit higher.
I would put them a little bit high. I'd probably move Michigan down a little bit. I think Michigan's ranked so high because they're 15-0. I think it's a schedule bias. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I agree. I'd probably push Michigan down a little bit and pull that team up.
Ohio State number 9. Now, I guess you discredit them a little bit because they were playing a third-string quarterback when they won the national title. But on the other hand, I might credit them for that. I mean, they were good enough to win after Braxton Miller and J.T. Barrett went down and Cardell Jones took over. That's a weird one. I guess you have to judge them on the merits of what they put on the field, but to think of the depth that Urban Meyer recruited for that team to still win with a third-string quarterback.
Oh, absolutely. The amount of talent you have to have around guys to be able to put a team like that together. Florida State's probably looking at this list and throwing their hands in there. Yeah. Like, if they can do it, why can't we do it? But yeah, I mean, I agree. Urban knew what he was doing. He had depth and he knew how to game plan for a third string quarterback.
All right, number 10, and Lauren is, as you know, a big Auburn fan, so this is your no respect team here. 2017 Alabama, which lost one game, the Iron Bowl, is ranked last on this list. They beat Clemson in the semifinals and beat Georgia 26-23 in overtime, but that was after making the halftime adjustment, and this just shows you the difference between college football and professional football, because these are two of the top quarterbacks in the NFL right now. They benched Jalen Hurts for Tua Tagovailoa. I mean, to think about that embarrassment of riches that they had on that team. But I guess, Lauren, they're looking at this Auburn loss and they're thinking, they can't beat Auburn. How good can they be?
That's right. That's exactly what it is. We come to spoil Alabama season every year because it's been so long since we've ever had a taste of that greatness. But anytime that we play in the Iron Bowl, it's always a coin flip. Always, always, always. So, yeah, I mean, I agree putting this team. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't hate it if they were at 7, 8, or 9. I mean, that was a really good team. Mm-hmm. And, you're right, just like you said, with Jalen Hurts and Tua on the same team. And then for Jalen Hurts to be benched. And I mean, he was such a team guy. He was benched with such grace. And it was really cool to see those two guys be on that same team together.
You know what else was amazing to me? That Hurts came back the next year and was a backup, was willing to do that, and then Tua got hurt, I think was at the SEC championship, and he came in and rescued them. And yeah, I agree. I had a lot of respect for him then, and then he deserved. I think as a matter of fact, Nick Saban helped him transfer to Oklahoma, where he was great there. So. I agree.
And that just goes to show you that no matter how much chaos is in college football with NIL and transfer portal, if you have a good staff, a good coach, a good environment in your locker room, you can keep good guys to get you to the big times. Because if Jalen Hurts or Tua, if they were not on the same team, they probably would not have won that championship, and they wouldn't have won that SEC championship.
Right.
So kudos to Nick for keeping those guys there for as long as he did.
Georgia's the preseason number 1 next year. Your Auburn team, which didn't show out very well against Maryland, they fired the defensive coordinator. Are they going to be a factor next year in the SEC?
I hope so. If they're not, there's going to be whispers about Hugh Freeze. I mean, you've got to start getting the team at least giving us some sort of hope. Mm-hmm. But this season did not show me anything. It showed me that we're the same Auburn team that we've always been. You you look good for a game and then look horrible against teams that you should beat. So I don't know. I think the culture needs to change. I think a lot needs to happen in this off season. And we'll see, but next year is really going to be the test. And if he doesn't get some sort of hope into this Auburn team, then it'll be interesting. Absolutely.
Well, August will be here before we know it. Thank you very much. Enjoyed these little chats every Tuesday morning, and boy, we'll roll right into the 2024 season pretty soon.
So fun. Can't wait.
All right, Lauren.
Thanks.
Take care. Talk to you soon.